David and Emily Carter were the kind of people everyone trusted, the couple whose home radiated warmth and safety, and whose children, Lucas and Sophie, seemed destined for bright futures. To neighbors, they were the perfect family, organized, cheerful, and successful in every way. But beneath the surface of their seemingly calm lives, a storm had been quietly brewing, one that would explode in the most horrific way imaginable. In a single night, the Carters vanished without a trace, leaving behind a house frozen in time and a community gripped by fear. What started as a mysterious disappearance soon revealed itself as a brutal, calculated murder that shocked an entire nation. No one could imagine that the smiling faces captured in family photos would be linked to one of the most violent crimes in modern American history. This was not just the story of a family wiped out. It was the unraveling of secrets, betrayal, and a chilling act of vengeance that would leave investigators struggling to understand how darkness could reach even the most ordinary of lives. The Carter family lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of a small American town, where life moved slowly and most people knew each other by name. Their house stood at the end of a peaceful street lined with tall oak trees and neatly trimmed lawns. It was a large white two-story home with wide windows and a wooden porch that wrapped around the front. To anyone passing by, it looked like the perfect place for a happy family. David Carter was known in town as a hard-working and responsible man. He worked as a financial consultant and had built a reputation for helping small businesses manage their money. His daily routine was predictable and disciplined. Every morning, he left the house early with a cup of coffee in hand and returned home before dinner. Many people admired his calm personality and quiet confidence. His wife, Emily Carter, worked at a nearby middle school as a counselor. She spent her days helping students who were struggling with stress, family issues, or school pressure. Parents trusted her and often spoke highly of the kindness she showed to every child she met. Outside of work, Emily devoted most of her time to her family and her home. Their son Lucas was 16 years old and attended the local high school. He was known as a bright student who enjoyed sports and technology. His younger sister Sophie was 10, full of energy and curiosity. She loved drawing, playing in the backyard, and spending time with her parents. The Carter house often felt warm and lively. Family photos covered the walls, showing vacations at beaches, national parks, and amusement parks. On weekends, the smell of grilled food drifted through the backyard during small gatherings with neighbors. To everyone around them, the Carters looked like a family living a peaceful and stable life. No one imagined that this calm home would soon become the center of a mystery that would shock the entire country. Police officers arrived at the Carter home after Emily's sister contacted authorities with growing concern. She had tried calling the family many times over the past 2 days, but no one answered. Messages remained unread, and none of the family members had shown up at work or school. For a family known for their routine and reliability, this silence was deeply unusual. When officers pulled into the driveway, they immediately noticed that both of the family's cars were parked outside. The house looked peaceful, just as it always had. Curtains hung neatly in the windows, and nothing appeared disturbed from the outside. But the longer the officers stood there, the more unsettling the silence became. After knocking several times with no response, police entered the house. Inside, everything seemed strangely normal. The living room was tidy, with magazines stacked neatly on the coffee table. Family photographs still lined the walls. In the kitchen, half-clean dinner plates rested in the sink, and a bowl of fruit sat untouched on the counter. Upstairs, the bedrooms looked as if the family had simply stepped out for a moment. Lucas's desk still had homework spread across it, and Sophie's stuffed animals were arranged carefully on her bed. Phones and personal belongings remained inside the house, something investigators found extremely suspicious. It was the basement that raised the first serious alarm. As detectives walked down the narrow stairs, a strong chemical smell filled the air. The scent of cleaning products was unusually strong, far more than what would be expected for a normal household. When investigators examined the basement floor more closely, they noticed faint dark stains on the concrete. The area appeared to have been scrubbed aggressively. Nearby, one section of the wall looked freshly painted, the colors slightly different from the rest of the basement. The deeper detectives looked, the clearer it became that something terrible had happened. Forensic investigators began examining the Carter house with extreme care. Every room, hallway, and corner was photographed and tested for evidence. What first appeared to be an ordinary home slowly started revealing signs of something far more disturbing. Special forensic lights were used to scan the basement floor where detectives had noticed the strange stains. Under the bright blue glow, the truth became impossible to ignore. Large patches of blood covered parts of the concrete floor, even though someone had clearly tried to scrub them away. The cleaning had removed the surface marks, but it could not hide the deeper traces soaked into the concrete. The amount of blood told investigators that a violent attack had likely taken place there. More clues soon appeared. Near the back of the basement, faint marks stretched across the floor toward the door that led outside. The pattern suggested something heavy had been dragged across the ground. Outside the door, the soil near the backyard looked slightly disturbed. It was not enough to confirm anything on its own, but it added to the growing suspicion that someone had removed something from the house after the crime. Despite these discoveries, one crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing. There were no bodies. The entire Carter family had vanished without leaving behind any clear explanation. Detectives searched nearby fields, wooded areas, and roads for any sign of where the victims might have been taken. Search teams combed through miles of land surrounding the neighborhood. Days passed with no breakthrough. Then, several miles away from the Carter home, a hunter walking through a remote wooded area and noticed something strange on the forest floor. The ground looked uneven, as if the soil had recently been disturbed. That single observation would soon lead investigators to the most horrifying discovery in the entire case. Police quickly secured the wooded area where the hunter had reported the disturbed soil. The location was deep in the forest, far from roads and houses. Tall trees blocked most of the sunlight, and the ground was covered with fallen leaves and damp earth. At first glance, the spot looked like any other part of the forest, but investigators noticed that one patch of soil appeared darker and uneven compared to the surrounding ground. Forensic teams carefully began digging. Within minutes, the smell of decay filled the air, confirming their worst fears. The digging slowed as investigators uncovered pieces of plastic buried beneath the soil. As the earth was removed layer by layer, the horrifying truth came into view. For bodies had been buried together in a shallow grave. The remains were carefully recovered and transported to the medical examiner's office. It did not take long to confirm their identities. The victims were David Carter, Emily Carter, and their two children, Lucas and Sophie. The discovery shocked the entire community. Only days earlier, people had believed the family was simply missing. Now it was clear that they had been victims of a brutal crime. Autopsies soon revealed even more disturbing details. Each family member had suffered severe blunt force trauma. The injuries suggested that the attack had been extremely violent. Medical examiners determined that the victims had died around the same time, pointing to a single horrifying event. One detail puzzled investigators. None of the victims showed strong signs of fighting back. There were almost no defensive injuries on their bodies. This suggested the family may have been caught completely off guard, or that they were somehow unable to resist the attacker. Now the investigation had shifted from a missing persons case to a full murder investigation. The question detectives faced was simple but terrifying. Who could carry out such a brutal crime against an entire family? After confirming the identities of the victims, investigators turned their attention to the Carter family's personal lives. Detectives began examining financial records, work histories, and digital activity, hoping to uncover anything that might explain why someone would target the family. At first, everything about their lives appeared ordinary. David Carter was known as a successful financial consultant who helped local businesses manage investments and loans. His reputation in the community was strong, and many clients described him as careful and trustworthy. But a deeper investigation into his financial records revealed a different picture. Over the past year, David's business had been struggling. Several important clients had quietly ended their contracts, and new clients were not coming in as quickly as before. Bank statements showed that David had taken out multiple loans to keep his company running. Some of these loans were large, and many of them were taken from private lenders rather than banks. Investigators also noticed that several payments were overdue, suggesting that David had been under serious financial pressure. Even more unusual were the frequent cash withdrawals from his personal accounts. Over the course of several months, David had removed thousands of dollars in cash. The money seemed to disappear without any clear record of where it had gone. At the same time, detectives discovered that Emily Carter had recently been searching online for information about financial fraud, private investigators, and hidden bank accounts. These searches suggested that she may have started to suspect something was wrong with their finances. The investigators began to believe that problems inside the Carter household had been growing quietly beneath the surface. What had looked like a stable and happy family from the outside might have been dealing with serious stress behind closed doors. But even with these discoveries, as investigators continued searching for clues, attention turned to the homes surrounding the Carter property. Detectives began knocking on doors, asking neighbors if they had seen or heard anything unusual on the night the family disappeared. Most residents reported nothing out of the ordinary. The street had been quiet, just like any other night. One neighbor, however, mentioned something that caught the detective's attention. A retired engineer who lived directly across the street had installed several security cameras around his home. He had set them up years earlier as part of a personal hobby and to monitor activity outside his property. Detectives immediately asked to review the footage. The cameras had been recording continuously, capturing the street and parts of the Carter driveway. Investigators carefully watched hours of video from the night the family vanished. For most of the evening, nothing unusual appeared. Cars occasionally passed by, and the quiet neighborhood remained still. But shortly after 2 in the morning, something changed. At exactly 2:14 a.m., a large dark pickup truck slowly entered the street. The vehicle moved carefully, almost as if the driver wanted to avoid attracting attention. The headlights dimmed as the truck approached the Carter house before finally stopping near the driveway. The camera angle did not clearly show the driver, but investigators noticed that the truck remained parked there for quite some time. Nearly 40 minutes later, movement appeared again. 2 figures were seen near the side of the house, partially hidden in the shadows. They carried large objects wrapped in plastic toward the back of the truck. The footage was grainy, making it difficult to identify faces or details. But one small detail stood out to investigators. One of the figures walked with a clear limp, dragging one leg slightly with every step. That unusual movement would soon guide detectives toward the person responsible. After studying the security footage, investigators focused on the small but important detail they had noticed. One of the figures moving near the truck walked with a noticeable limp. Although the video quality was poor, the unusual movement was clear enough to stand out. Detectives began reviewing the Carter family's personal and professional connections, searching for anyone who might match that description. They looked through old business records, past disputes, and people who had recently interacted with the family. One name quickly drew attention. Michael Harris had once been David Carter's business partner. Several years earlier, the 2 men had started a financial consulting company together. At first, their partnership had been successful, but documents revealed that the relationship between them had ended badly. Court records showed that the business partnership had collapsed after a serious financial dispute. Harris had accused David of mishandling company funds, while David had claimed that Harris made poor financial decisions that damaged the company. The conflict eventually forced them to separate professionally. Investigators also discovered that Michael Harris had suffered a severe leg injury in a car accident about a year earlier. Medical reports confirmed that the injury had left him with a permanent limp. The connection immediately raised suspicion. Detectives obtained a search warrant for Harris's property. When they entered his garage, they discovered a large tarp folded in one corner. Laboratory tests later revealed small traces of blood on the material. The blood matched the Carter family. The search uncovered even more disturbing evidence. Investigators found records of a storage locker rented under a false name. When police opened the locker, they discovered several tools along with cleaning supplies similar to those found in the Carter basement. Microscopic blood evidence was present on the tools. As investigators gathered all the evidence, they slowly reconstructed the events that led to the deaths of the Carter family. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, revealing a crime driven by anger, obsession, and long-standing resentment. Michael Harris had once built his career alongside David Carter. Their financial consulting business had grown quickly in the beginning, but over time, the partnership collapsed under pressure. Financial disagreements turned into personal accusations, and the two men eventually separated, each blaming the other for the failure of the company. According to investigators, Harris never truly moved on from the conflict. Records showed that he had spent months studying David's business activity and personal life. Bank records, online searches, and surveillance around the Carter home suggested that Harris had been planning something long before the night of the crime. Late one night, Harris drove his pickup truck to the Carter house while the neighborhood was asleep. Evidence suggested he entered the home quietly and forced David into the basement. What began as an act of revenge quickly turned into a brutal and uncontrollable attack. The violence escalated, and the rest of the family became victims as well. Forensic evidence indicated that the entire event happened within a short period of time. After the murders, Harris spent hours attempting to erase the evidence. The basement was scrubbed with strong cleaning chemicals, and parts of the wall were repainted to hide bloodstains. The bodies were then wrapped in plastic and transported to the forest, where Harris buried them in a shallow grave far from the house. For a brief moment, it seemed like the plan might succeed. But one detail changed everything. The neighbor's security camera had silently recorded the truck arriving and leaving that night. The image of the limping figure provided investigators with a clue they needed to uncover the truth.